So looking at black, red, and mid best 1 limited, this is probably your 1A aggressive deck compared to like white, red being your 1B aggressive deck. That being said, it still probably is in that third tier, the last tier of decks, is because it's a deck that's tough to come together unless it's just really open. And even when it does come together, if you're like going second, for example, you're on the play, or the opponent just doesn't stumble, they're probably going to be able to stabilize, and then you're just going to run out of steam. That being said, there are exceptions to that. If you're able to get multiple of the key uncommons, like the Vampire Socialite, or getting closing speed with like a Thermal Alchemist, then maybe you can hang on even after your creatures are either dead or not able to attack much anymore. But for the most part, you've really got to be low to the ground and try and get through where you can, take advantage of the vampire synergies that do exist, so they're not nearly as strong. It's just the value plays that exist in some of the stronger archetypes. So ideally, you have a low curve. It starts with a few Ecstatic Awakeners, and then Siege Zombie does have that closing speed where you can be tapping it, deal 1 or 2 damage when your attackers are no longer able to get through profitably. And then this is probably the only deck where you would actually want Vampire Interloper. And the general rule for these table shells is just limiting it to 2 of a common, but I did want to point out that these oftentimes can come later in a draft and can really get your game plan going on. So want to emphasize that this is a reasonable place for the card, and you would even play 3 or potentially 4 if you have enough of the beneficial cards, like the Arrogant Outlaws or cards like that do benefit from getting damage into an opponent, your Vampire Socialite, for example. Ideally, if you could have a Diagraph Horde or 2, it would play well, though it's not quite as strong in this deck as it is in any of the other black decks that are discussed. In terms of spells, you're looking for some removal. Ideally, you can clear out a blocker before attack, so you can get through your damage profitably. In particular, if you are on the Vampire Interlopers, trying to get rid of some flyers, with like a Midnight Ambush or a Foul Play, so you can swing through, can be beneficial. Defenestrate does still have a place in the deck, because you can get through like Decayed Zombie tokens or Arrogant Outlaws, but it's maybe not as strong. And then this probably is a place where No Way Out can play, because if you're looking to put cards on the battlefield and then swing into your opponent, if you can make them be depleted of resources, like with a No Way Out, and get a Decayed Zombie token, which might turn into 2 points, that can be helpful for preventing them from stabilizing, coming up the ground so you can't get through, or catching up with some value creatures. And then in particular, if you can get a little bit of card draw through cantripping like Neonate's Rush, that can be nice to either finish off a creature or ideally knock out an X1 prior to attacks or at the end of turn. And then again, for closing damage, in addition to the Thermal Alchemist, you can land, any of those. A Dreadhound can help once your creatures are stonewalled to help bring back ability to attack and trade and have your opponent lose life from that. So again, it's a tough archetype to come together. You really need to be able to land multiple of these 2-drops and strong uncommons like the Socialite, the Morbid Opportunist, and some of the removal. Again, you can't go heavy in removal in this deck because you're not going to have the creatures on board to profitably attack and take advantage of a clear or reduced board from your opponent. You're not going to be able to generate your Vampire synergies of dealing damage to the opponent unless you do have like a Neonate's Rush, for example, which can be beneficial in this deck. So that's black-red, predominantly black-focused, red to try and clear out some creatures and take advantage of the gold cards that exist. You will notice the only really good gold card is the Socialite, but it does play up exceptionally well in this deck, so however many of those you can get, you would play them. So that's black-red, probably your 1A aggro deck, but aggro's not great in this format, so still probably a tier 3 deck in mid-limited.